back at the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association Impact Conference at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Now, Peggy and I are set up in this area here where there are other folks displaying their companies, and we've got our little backdrop here, and we're doing interviews. And the guy next to us is from Twixwood Nursery in Berrien Springs, Michigan. His name is Steve Ratchett. And he came back from a seminar, and he said, you know, you really need to talk to that husband and wife team because they're amazing. They've got a really great energy. And so I said, okay, absolutely. So here we have Leslie and Gilbert Smith, and it turns out I've been to your house, which was several years ago. That was a while. We're talking going like on 6 or 7 years now.
Yes.
When I was doing the TV show Dig in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a million years ago. So I know you guys know what you're doing because I've seen it in action. I've seen it on your property. But apparently you know what you're doing here at this conference because a lot of people were impressed with what you had to say. So the title of their talk is Dirty Little Secrets, What Every Tree Wishes Every Designer and Installer Knew. Wow, that sounds like a loaded question.
Well, we could talk about trees all day long, but I think whenever we talk about trees' secrets or the mysteries, we have to talk about roots because it's the thing that nobody sees, that nobody really thinks about, and definitely
that nobody understands.
Yeah.
They
Well,
actually have misconceptions about.
Well, yeah, first of all, people think roots go down
Right.
Yes.
and they go out. All right, basically they go like a foot or a couple of feet at max, and then they go like this. And once you understand it, it opens the door to a lot of other understanding, doesn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Such as, how close can I get to this tree with a sprinkling system or with my house or a sidewalk? And the answer is as far away as you can stand it, and certainly outside of the canopy.
If
All right.
possible.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about that on the show in terms of, say, mulch rings around a tree.
Right.
I'm a big fan of huge mulch rings, and we've seen that in action. Our sponsor Bartlett took us down to North Carolina and showed us examples of that and how it affects a tree. And a lot of folks want to grow that lawn right up to the tree, and then they're bumping into it with their lawnmower and their string trimmers, and that's not good for a tree, is it?
Right. And the Morton Arboretum has done studies where they have measured the amount of roots underneath grass, tree roots underneath grass, and then underneath mulch, and it has more than doubled when you put it underneath mulch as opposed to grass.
Well, they're competing.
Yeah.
You know, and I've said this before. In the old days, I used to say when you have trees versus lawn, trees always win because of the shade factor. But then I saw the Morton Arboretum study, and I realized they both lose.
Yes,
Really,
it's true. And actually, the initial research on mulch was done at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and they planted, I don't know, it was over 100 trees all in a row, and they mulched a large 8-foot diameter, then a tiny 3-foot diameter, and then no mulch. And the trees were thriving, struggling, and dead all the way down the line. So that's a pretty graphic illustration of the fact that
it sounds like my life somehow. So, I don't know. There's striving, there's struggling, and there's dead. Okay, maybe it's my career I'm thinking of. I don't know. So what do people get wrong out of the gate when they're putting in a tree on their property?
I would say they plant them too deep, at least in,
okay.
northeast Illinois.
Can I get you to hold the microphone just a little
I'm
closer?
sorry, yeah.
That's it, right.
They plant trees too deeply, at least in northeast Illinois, where our soil is made up of clay. So they're planting trees essentially in a clay pot, and that drowns most trees.
Yeah, you can get away with a tree being planted too high, but you really can't get away with it
right.
being too low.
Yep.
So first of all, they do that wrong. All right, and I imagine sighting is a huge issue as well.
Yeah, oftentimes, we have a son who's 6'4", and I often say, there was nothing that I could do to make him only 6 feet tall. That was his DNA from the very beginning. And trees all have their own DNA that gives them a genetic size, and rarely do we take that into account when we're doing planting.
And certainly when people say they're going to give their tree a haircut, it's the worst thing in the world that you can do because trees get their food from the sun. So if you're cutting off their leaves, you're cutting off their source of energy.
Well, and it also leads to the idea of what's a haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, nipping and tucking around the the edge of the tree, the canopy, it's not going to help the shape. It's going to result in smaller branches, and as you say, you're cutting off the energy of the tree as well. So, how do you advise people on pruning? Get an arborist, or what?
Absolutely,
If
that would
okay.
be sort
That's
of the
number
minimum.
one, right? But
Yeah.
you know, people want to do it themselves. So,
Yes, but I think if we could only convey one thing about trimming, it would be learn how to make proper cuts and know that whenever you're cutting anything on a tree or a shrub, you're promoting growth at the point of the cut. People have this misconception that if they cut off the top, they're going to be promoting growth at the bottom, which never happens.
okay, we need to wrap this up, but the one thing I wanted to address, because I heard some folks talking to you after the seminar, and Leslie, you're a woman in a man's world here, okay? There are not a...
His mic a little bit.
What's that?
Okay.
Dean's saying his mic's low.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, we brought it up. They're getting it on delay because he's got it now. But what's it like being out there and trying to convince people that you know what you're doing?
Well, I guess after 40 years of doing this, I've kind of gotten used to my role as a woman in a man's world. But I've always, it's kind of been my lot in life, and what I've learned is that if I know my stuff, that eventually I can win people over. And I think I'm always advocating for women in our industry because I think we have a lot to offer, and I encourage young women to go into horticulture and arboriculture because I think it's a great field.
And she's also the CEO of our business.
Aha.
She signs the checks.
So
So
there
they
you
take her seriously.
but you're right. I hope women go into horticulture, but again, as you said, arboriculture.
Yes.
Because you don't see a lot of. And by the way, Microsoft Word still does not understand that arboriculture is a real word.
It's
Have you ever
true.
noticed
Yeah.
that?
They finally memorized it on my computer, but you're right.
I still get the squiggly little line. I go, what century are you guys living in here? Well, listen, Gilbert and Leslie, thank you so much. It's so good to see you again.
Yes.
And congratulations on what was a fantastic talk. And I hope I see you again real soon, probably at the next conference. Who
All
knows?
right. Thank
All
you.
It's Mike Nowak from The Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, who's behind the camera. We will have more interviews in just a little bit.